My name is Chelsea Bennett, and I'm here to tell you about the day I learned that family loyalty is a one-way street, at least in the Bennett household. 3 months ago, I stood on the graduation stage at Northwestern University, diploma in hand, master's degree in finance finally mine after years of grinding through night classes and weekend jobs. The applause echoed across the auditorium, but as I scanned the crowd, my heart sank. Row after row of proud families, and there in the back corner sat 2 empty seats with my name taped to them. They didn't come. Again. You see, in the Bennett family hierarchy, I've always been the understudy. My sister Amber, 2 years younger and blessed with our mother's blonde hair and charm, has been the star of every show since birth. When Amber wanted piano lessons, Mom and Dad hired the best instructor in Chicago. When she dreamed of studying abroad in Paris, they emptied their savings account for her semester at the Sorbonne. But when I needed textbooks for college, Chelsea, you're smart enough to figure it out. Independence builds character. So I did figure it out. I worked double shifts at Tony's Diner throughout high school, saving every tip for tuition. I applied for every scholarship, every grant, every work-study program I could find. While Amber was posting Instagram photos from European cafes, I was hunched over accounting textbooks at 2 a.m., fueled by truck stop coffee and determination. Our parents, William and Patricia Bennett, run a successful insurance agency in the suburbs of Milwaukee. To their country club friends, we're the picture-perfect American family. Dad with his weekend golf games, Mom with her book club meetings, and their 2 accomplished daughters. What those friends don't see is how different accomplished looks for each of us. When Amber got her real estate license last year, Dad threw her a celebration party at the Hilton. When I landed my first job at a major investment firm after graduation, I got a text, "Congrats. Don't forget to call Grandma Rose on Sunday." Grandma Rose and Grandpa Joe, my mother's parents, they were different. Their modest 2-story colonial in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, with its wraparound porch and vegetable garden, was my sanctuary growing up. Every summer, while Amber was at cheerleading camp, I'd spend weeks with them, learning to fish on Lake Geneva, helping Grandpa Joe restore his vintage Chevy, and sitting with Grandma Rose as she taught me to balance a checkbook properly. "Chelsea," Grandpa Joe would say, his weathered hands steady on his coffee mug, "the most important thing in life isn't how much money you have, it's knowing how to protect what matters." I thought he was talking about savings accounts and insurance policies. I had no idea he was preparing me for war. Last winter, when their health began failing, I became their primary caregiver. Every weekend, I'd drive the 2 hours from Chicago to Wisconsin, managing their medications, coordinating doctor appointments, and handling their finances. Mom and Dad would visit once a month, usually with Amber in tow for photos they'd post on Facebook with captions about family time. When Grandpa Joe passed in March, followed by Grandma Rose just 6 weeks later, I thought the hardest part was over. I was wrong. The hardest part was about to begin. The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing quarterly reports at my downtown Chicago office. The deep, measured voice of attorney Franklin Walsh filled the quiet conference room where I'd stepped away to take the call. "Chelsea, your grandparents named you as the sole beneficiary of their estate. We need to schedule a meeting to discuss the details." I nearly dropped my phone. Sole beneficiary? What about my parents? What about Amber? "The will is very specific. Everything goes to you, the house, the investments, their savings. Current estimated value is approximately $1.2 million. I sat in stunned silence, staring out at Lake Michigan through the floor-to-ceiling windows. $1.2 million. It sounded surreal, like something from a movie. But what hit me harder than the number was the realization that my grandparents had trusted me completely. They'd seen something in me that my own parents had overlooked. That evening, I drove to Lake Geneva and stood on their porch one last time as just their granddaughter, not their heir. The key still fit perfectly in the lock. Grandpa Joe had given me my own copy years ago for emergencies. Inside, everything remained exactly as they'd left it. Grandma Rose's reading glasses on the kitchen table, Grandpa Joe's fishing magazines stacked neatly by his recliner. But as I walked through their home, a cold realization settled in my stomach. I knew my family. I knew how they operated. The moment they learned about this inheritance, everything would change. They'd want their fair share. They'd expect me to be the same pushover Chelsea who always gave in to keep the peace. Not this time. I pulled out my phone and called Franklin Walsh back. "Mr. Walsh, I need to ask you about trusts. Specifically, irrevocable trusts. 2 days later, I sat in his mahogany-paneled office in downtown Milwaukee as he explained my options. An irrevocable trust removes the assets from your personal ownership, Chelsea. You'd serve as the trustee, you control everything, but legally, the assets belong to the trust. Once it's established, no one can change it without your consent. Not even family members? Not even family members. And if anyone tries to claim ownership through forged documents or fraudulent means, they'd be committing federal crimes. I signed the papers that afternoon. Over the next month, working with a financial advisor named Catherine Phillips, I quietly transferred everything into the Chelsea Bennett Family Trust. The house deed, the investment accounts, even Grandpa Joe's vintage Chevy, all of it legally protected behind an impenetrable wall of paperwork and federal law. I told no one. When Mom called asking when I'd be sorting through Grandma's things, I kept my voice neutral. Still working through the legal stuff, Mom. These things take time. When Amber texted, "Can't wait to see the house. I have some ideas for renovating," I simply replied, "We'll see." I let them believe I was still the same old Chelsea, overwhelmed, probably procrastinating, definitely in need of their guidance. But every weekend, I drove to Lake Geneva, maintaining the property, tending Grandma Rose's garden, and preparing for the storm I knew was coming. Because in the Bennett family, when money appears, the vultures aren't far behind. 6 weeks after the trust was finalized, an eerie calm settled over the Bennett family dynamics. No urgent phone calls, no unexpected visits, no sudden displays of sisterly affection from Amber. But I'd learned long ago that silence in my family usually meant plotting. The first crack in their facade came during our monthly family dinner at Romano's Italian Bistro in Milwaukee. Mom was picking at her chicken parmesan when she casually mentioned, "You know, Chelsea, your father and I have been thinking. That big house in Lake Geneva is really too much for one person to handle. Have you considered what Grandma and Grandpa would have wanted for both their granddaughters?" I took a sip of my wine and kept my expression neutral. "What do you mean, Mom?" "Well," Dad jumped in, setting down his fork with practiced precision, "we think they probably intended for you and Amber to share the inheritance. After all, families should stick together." Amber nodded eagerly, her perfectly manicured nails drumming against her water glass. "I've actually been looking into it, Chels. I know some great contractors who could split the house into a duplex. We could each have our own side, or we could sell it and split the money. Either way, it's only fair." I smiled sweetly. "That's an interesting idea. I'll have to think about it." But I was done thinking. I was watching. And what I saw over the next few weeks was a carefully orchestrated campaign to make me feel guilty for keeping what my grandparents had legally left to me. Suddenly, family gatherings became exercises in passive aggression. Cousins who barely knew my grandparents started sharing memories about how much Grandma Rose and Grandpa Joe had loved Amber. Mom began dropping comments about how generous families share their blessings. Amber started posting old photos of herself with our grandparents on social media, with captions about missing family and honoring their memory. The most telling moment came when I overheard a phone conversation between Mom and her sister, Aunt Linda, while I was helping with dishes after Sunday dinner. "Patricia, you need to be more direct with Chelsea. She's young and doesn't understand how these things work. That money should be helping the whole family, not just sitting in some account." "I know, but you know how stubborn she can be. We need to approach this delicately." "Delicately? Patricia, we're talking about over $1 million. Amber's got student loans to pay off, and you and Bill could use that money for retirement. Don't let Chelsea's selfishness ruin this opportunity." I set the dishes down quietly and walked out the back door, my hands shaking with anger. Selfishness? I was selfish for accepting what my grandparents had willingly left to me. I was selfish for not immediately handing over the fruit of their lifetime of hard work to people who'd visited them maybe 10 times in their final years. That night, I called Catherine Phillips, my financial advisor. "Catherine, I need you to set up additional security measures on all the trust accounts. And I want everything monitored for any suspicious activity." "Chelsea, is everything okay?" "It's about to not be." 2 weeks later, my suspicions were confirmed when Amber showed up at my apartment unannounced, carrying a bottle of wine and wearing her most innocent smile. "Hey sis. I thought we could have a girls' night and talk about the house situation." We sat on my couch, sharing takeout Chinese food and making small talk until Amber finally revealed her true purpose. Chelsea, I've been doing some research, and I found a lawyer who thinks there might have been an error in Grandma and Grandpa's will. He says that in Wisconsin, when grandparents don't specifically exclude other family members, the inheritance should be distributed equally among all grandchildren. I nearly choked on my lo mein. Amber, are you seriously telling me you've consulted a lawyer about contesting our grandparents' will? Not contesting. Just clarifying. Look, Chels, I know you're attached to the house, but think about it practically. You live in Chicago, you work crazy hours, you don't even have time to enjoy the place. Wouldn't it make more sense to sell it and use the money to really build our futures? I set down my chopsticks and looked directly at my sister. And how exactly would our futures benefit from me giving up my inheritance? Well, I could pay off my student loans and put a down payment on a condo here in Milwaukee. Maybe start my own real estate agency. And Mom and Dad could finally take that European vacation they've been talking about for years. We'd all win. I smiled that same sweet smile I'd been perfecting for months. That sounds wonderful, Amber. For everyone except me. She laughed nervously. Come on, Chelsea. Don't be dramatic. You get your share too. It's not like we'd cut you out completely. How generous of you to offer me a portion of my own inheritance. The mask slipped from Amber's face for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. But then she recovered, reaching over to squeeze my hand. Just think about it, okay? Family is all we have. After she left, I sat alone in my apartment, staring out at the Chicago skyline. The game had officially begun, and they still thought they were playing against the old Chelsea, the one who always compromised, always sacrificed for family harmony. They had no idea that this Chelsea had learned to play chess while they were still playing checkers. I knew they would come eventually. What I didn't expect was the sheer audacity of their approach. It was a crisp Saturday morning in October when I arrived at the Lake Geneva house for my weekly maintenance visit. The maple trees lining the driveway were ablaze with autumn colors, and the morning mist was just lifting off the lake when I heard the familiar rumble of Dad's silver Ford Explorer coming up the gravel drive. But this time, they weren't alone. A white moving truck followed behind them, diesel engine growling as it navigated the narrow driveway. My stomach dropped as I watched all three of them, Mom, Dad, and Amber, climb out of the Explorer with the kind of confident energy that comes from believing you've already won. I was raking leaves in the front yard, wearing my old Northwestern sweatshirt and work gloves, probably. Looking exactly like the overwhelmed young woman they expected to find. Amber practically bounced up the walkway, her designer autumn coat perfectly coordinated with her boots, a manila folder clutched in her manicured hands. Chelsea. Perfect timing, she called out with a brightness that made my skin crawl. We brought some people to help you move your things. I leaned against my rake, keeping my voice steady. Move my things where? Dad stepped forward, and I recognized that expression, the same one he'd worn when he told 8-year-old me that my birthday party was being postponed because Amber had a dance recital the same day. Honey, we've got some good news and some complicated news. The good news is we've sorted out the legal confusion about the house. He handed me the folder with a flourish, like he was presenting me with a gift. Inside were official-looking documents stamped with impressive seals, transferring ownership of 247 Lakeview Drive from estate of Joseph and Rose Mitchell to Amber Marie Bennett. Turns out there was an error in the original will, Mom explained, her voice dripping with false sympathy. Grandma and Grandpa's lawyer made a mistake with the paperwork. The house was always supposed to go to both of you girls, but since you already have a career and a place in Chicago, we all agreed it made more sense for Amber to take ownership. I flipped through the pages, noting the pristine formatting, the notary stamp, and the signatures that looked remarkably similar to documents I'd seen before. And when exactly did we all agree to this? Well, we discussed it as a family, Dad said, his tone taking on that edge it got when he was losing patience. You said you'd think about it, and we took that as consent to move forward. We've already got a buyer lined up, a nice family from Milwaukee looking for a lake house. Amber's handling the sale through her agency. Amber nodded enthusiastically. I found them last month. They're offering asking price, cash deal. After commission and closing costs, we're looking at about $850,000. I figure we'd split that 60-40, since I'm doing all the work to coordinate the sale. The moving truck driver had climbed out and was now standing awkwardly by his cab, clearly sensing the tension but unsure whether to start unloading equipment. I closed the folder and handed it back to Dad. "This is fascinating. Really impressive work." "I'm glad you understand," Mom said, relief flooding her voice. "We were worried you might be upset, but this really is the best solution for everyone." "Oh, I understand perfectly." I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a contact I'd been hoping I wouldn't need to use. "I understand that you think I'm the same pushover I used to be. I understand that you believe you can forge documents and steal my inheritance without consequences." Amber's smile faltered. "Forge documents? Chelsea, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that this house has been in an irrevocable trust for the past 4 months. I'm talking about the fact that your pretty little documents there are about as legally binding as a grocery list. And I'm talking about the fact that you just committed federal fraud." I hit the call button and put the phone on speaker. "Mr. Walsh? This is Chelsea Bennett." "Yes, they're here now." "Could you send Deputy Martinez and that representative from the State Attorney General's office?" "Perfect. They should be here in about 10 minutes. The color drained from Dad's face. "Chelsea, what have you done?" "I protected what Grandma Rose and Grandpa Joe trusted me to protect. Did you really think I'd be naive enough to leave $1 million inheritance sitting unprotected, knowing how this family operates?" A black sedan was already turning into the driveway, followed by a white SUV with official state plates. Attorney Franklin Walsh stepped out of the sedan, briefcase in hand, while Deputy Martinez and a woman in a business suit emerged from the SUV. "Folks," Deputy Martinez called out, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd done this before, "I'm going to need everyone to stay exactly where they are." The moving truck driver was already backing down the driveway without waiting for instructions. Amber clutched her folder to her chest like it might somehow protect her from what was coming. And I smiled the same sweet smile I'd been practicing for months, watching their confident expressions crumble into panic and disbelief. "You really thought I'd let that happen?" I said quietly, just loud enough for my family to hear. "You really thought I was still that scared little girl who would give up everything to keep the peace?" As the state investigator began reading them their rights, I finally felt the weight of years of manipulation and disrespect lifting from my shoulders. The real game was just beginning. 2 hours later, I sat in Franklin Walsh's office while the chaos of the morning slowly transformed into cold, hard evidence. The state investigator, Detective Sarah Morrison, had photographed every document Amber brought, cataloged the fake notary seal, and traced the filing to an online service that specialized in what she diplomatically called questionable legal documents. "Chelsea, this is cut and dried," Franklin said, spreading copies of their forged papers across his conference table. "The notary stamp number doesn't exist in Wisconsin's database. The witness signatures are fake. We confirmed both alleged witnesses were out of state on the date listed. And the filing service they used has been flagged by 3 state attorney generals for facilitating fraud." Detective Morrison nodded, her expression grim. "Your sister signed her real name to falsified documents claiming ownership of property worth over $1 million. That's not just fraud, it's federal crime territory." Through Franklin's office window, I could see Lake Geneva sparkling in the afternoon sun, peaceful and unchanged despite the morning's drama. My parents and Amber had been released pending formal charges, but I knew their lawyer was probably already explaining to them just how serious their situation had become. "What happens next?" I asked. "Amber will likely face charges for document fraud, identity theft, and attempted property theft. Your parents could be charged as accessories if we can prove they knew the documents were fake," Detective Morrison explained. "But that's not your concern anymore. Your trust is airtight, and your property is protected." That evening, I drove back to the house alone. The moving truck tire tracks were still visible in the gravel, but everything else looked exactly as it should. I sat on the front porch swing where Grandpa Joe and I used to watch the sunset, and for the first time in months, I felt truly at peace. My phone had been buzzing all day with calls from extended family members, but I wasn't ready to deal with the aftermath yet. Instead, I called Catherine Phillips to ensure all our security measures were still in place. "Chelsea, I've been monitoring the accounts all day," she assured me. "Everything is secure. No unusual activity, no unauthorized access attempts. Your grandparents' legacy is safe." 3 days later, the real fallout began. Amber's real estate license was suspended pending investigation. Mom and Dad's insurance agency was placed under review by the state licensing board. And suddenly, I was getting calls from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, all wanting to know my side of the story. The most difficult call came from my cousin Jake, who'd always been like a brother to me growing up. His voice was careful, measured. "Chelsea, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Did you really have them arrested over a family disagreement?" I took a deep breath. "Jake, they brought a moving truck to steal my house using forged documents. Would you call that a family disagreement?" "But, they're saying you manipulated Grandma and Grandpa when they were sick. That you took advantage of them." The accusation hit like a physical blow, but I'd been expecting it. "Jake, I spent every weekend for 2 years driving to Wisconsin to take care of them. I managed their medications, took them to doctor appointments, helped them with their finances. Where was everyone else?" Silence on the other end of the line. "I have bank records showing every transaction, medical records documenting every appointment, and a paper trail proving exactly how involved I was in their care. If you want to see the evidence, I'll send it to you. But I won't defend myself against lies created by people who are facing criminal charges." Over the next week, I sent a comprehensive file to 15 family members, documentation of my care for our grandparents, legal proof of the trust's validity, and copies of the fraudulent documents Amber had created. The responses were swift and overwhelming in their support. Cousin Jake called back first. "Chelsea, I owe you an apology. I had no idea how much you did for them, or how little everyone else was involved. I'm sorry I doubted you." Aunt Linda, Dad's sister, sent a long email expressing her shock at what her brother had attempted and her admiration for how I'd handled the situation. Even some of Amber's friends reached out to apologize for believing the stories she'd been spreading on social media. But the most meaningful response came from Mrs. Patterson, Grandma Rose's best friend and neighbor. She called me on a Thursday evening, her elderly voice warm with emotion. "Chelsea dear, I want you to know that your grandmother talked about you constantly in those final months. She was so proud of how responsible and caring you'd become. She told me more than once that she knew you'd protect everything they'd worked for, and she was right." That weekend, I returned to the house in Lake Geneva and spent the entire Saturday in Grandma Rose's garden, pulling weeds and preparing the flower beds for winter. As the sun set over the lake, I felt their presence in a way I hadn't since the funeral. I'd kept my promise to them, but more importantly, I'd kept my promise to myself. I was no longer the family doormat, and I never would be again. Act 6, The Aftermath and New Boundaries. 6 months after what I'd started calling Moving Truck Day, the legal consequences were finally settled. Amber pled guilty to document fraud and was sentenced to 2 years probation, 200 hours of community service, and restitution for legal fees. Her real estate license was permanently revoked, and she was required to attend financial ethics counseling. Mom and Dad escaped criminal charges but faced professional sanctions from the Wisconsin Insurance Commission. Their agency was placed on probation, and they were required to complete additional ethics training. The stress had aged them both visibly. Dad's hair had gone completely gray, and Mom had developed a nervous habit of checking her phone constantly. But the most significant change wasn't legal, it was personal. I was sitting in my Chicago apartment on a rainy Thursday evening when Mom called for the first time since the arrests. Her voice was small, defeated in a way I'd never heard before. "Chelsea? It's Mom. I wanted to see if we could talk." I set down my wine glass and chose my words carefully. "What did you want to talk about?" "I want to apologize. Not just for the documents, I mean for everything. For treating you differently than Amber all these years. For not appreciating how much you did for Grandma and Grandpa. For not being a better mother to you." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with years of unspoken hurt. "Mom, I appreciate you saying that. But words are easy. What matters is what happens next." "What do you mean?" "I mean that if you want any kind of relationship with me going forward, things have to be different. I'm not going to be the family scapegoat anymore. I'm not going to accept being treated as less important than Amber. And I'm certainly not going to pretend that what you did wasn't a betrayal of everything Grandma and Grandpa believed in." There was a long pause before she spoke again. "What would different look like?" I'd been thinking about this conversation for months, preparing for it. "It would look like equal treatment. Equal respect. Equal consideration. It would look like acknowledging that I'm a successful adult who doesn't need your guidance or permission to live my life. And it would look like you earning back my trust instead of expecting me to just forget what happened. And if we can't do that, then we don't have a relationship. It's that simple. The conversation ended with tentative plans to meet for coffee the following month, neutral ground, time limited, no expectations beyond basic civility. Amber's approach was different. She showed up at my office building 3 weeks later, looking thinner and more subdued than I'd ever seen her. Her usual designer wardrobe had been replaced with simple business attire, and her confidence had evaporated entirely. "Chelsea, please. Just give me 5 minutes." We sat in the lobby cafe, and for the first time in our lives, Amber seemed genuinely vulnerable. "I know I screwed up. I know I hurt you. But I also know that I was taught from childhood that I deserved things just because I wanted them. Mom and Dad made me believe that you were supposed to take care of me, that sharing meant you giving and me taking." I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation, but found only exhaustion and what might have been genuine remorse. "That's not an excuse, Amber. You're an adult. You chose to forge documents and try to steal my inheritance. I know. And I'm not asking you to forgive me or forget what I did. I wanted you to know that losing everything, my license, my reputation, my sense of who I thought I was, it made me realize how wrong I've been about so many things." She pulled a folded paper from her purse and placed it on the table between us. "I wrote this for you. You don't have to read it now, or ever. But I wanted you to have it." After she left, I sat alone in the cafe and unfolded the letter. 3 pages of Amber's careful handwriting, detailing not just her apologies but her acknowledgement of specific ways she'd been selfish and hurtful over the years. It wasn't perfect, and it didn't erase the damage, but it was honest in a way that surprised me. That weekend, I drove to Lake Geneva and sat on the porch swing with Amber's letter and a cup of Grandma Rose's favorite tea. The house felt peaceful, settled, like it had finally exhaled after months of tension. I thought about forgiveness, not the cheap kind that pretends nothing happened, but the difficult kind that acknowledges hurt while choosing to move forward. I wasn't ready for that yet, and I might never be. But for the first time, I could imagine a future where my family's toxicity didn't define my life. As the sun set over the lake, I made a decision. I would give my parents and Amber the chance to prove they could change, but I would do it on my terms, with my boundaries firmly in place. The scared little girl who always gave in to keep the peace was gone forever. In her place was a woman who knew her worth and refused to accept anything less than respect. Act 7, Peace and Protection. 2 years later, I'm writing this story from the front porch of the Lake Geneva house on a perfect summer morning. The lake is glass smooth, reflecting clouds like a mirror, and Grandma Rose's garden is in full bloom thanks to the landscaping company I hired to maintain it properly. The house has become my weekend sanctuary, a place where I can disconnect from my demanding job as a senior financial analyst and reconnect with the peace my grandparents created here. I've made some updates, a new security system, fresh paint in Grandpa Joe's favorite blue, and a modern kitchen that would have made Grandma Rose smile. But the most important thing I've preserved is the feeling of safety and love that filled this place when they were alive. My relationship with my family has evolved into something I never expected, not perfect, but honest. Mom and Dad have slowly earned back some of my trust through consistent actions rather than empty words. They attend my work events now, ask about my life with genuine interest, and most importantly, they've stopped treating me like the family doormat. The change wasn't immediate or easy. There were setbacks, arguments, and moments when I had to remind them that respect isn't negotiable. But gradually, we built something new on the foundation of clear boundaries and mutual accountability. Amber's journey has been the most dramatic. The loss of her real estate career forced her to re-evaluate everything about her life and values. She went back to school for social work and now helps families navigate financial crises. Ironic perhaps, but genuinely meaningful work that seems to have given her purpose beyond her own wants and needs. She visits the house occasionally, always calling first, always respectful of my space and decisions. Our relationship will never be what it was in childhood, but it's become something more honest and sustainable. Last month, she brought her new boyfriend to meet me, a quiet teacher named Marcus who clearly adores her but doesn't enable her worst tendencies. After dinner, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Amber said something that surprised me. "You know, I used to think you were lucky that Grandma and Grandpa left you everything. But now I realize they were smart. They knew you'd protect their legacy and honor their memory. I would have just spent the money and moved on. I reached over and squeezed her hand, the first physical affection we'd shared in years. They loved you too, Amber. But love doesn't mean giving someone everything they want. Sometimes it means trusting them to learn from their mistakes. The legal protections I put in place remain ironclad. The trust ensures that my grandparents' assets are secure not just from my immediate family, but from any future challenges or complications. Catherine Phillips still manages the investments, and Franklin Walsh continues to oversee the legal aspects. But more importantly, I've learned to protect myself, my time, my energy, my emotional well-being. I choose how much contact to have with family members based on their behavior, not their genetics. I set boundaries and enforce them consistently. I don't apologize for being successful or for refusing to be anyone's financial safety net. Some relatives still don't understand my choices. A few cousins think I was too harsh, or that I should let bygones be bygones. But I've learned that keeping the peace at the expense of my own well-being isn't peace at all, it's just delayed conflict. The most surprising development has been the new family I've found. Catherine Phillips and her husband have become close friends who invite me to holidays and celebrations. Franklin Walsh and his wife treat me like the daughter they never had. My Northwestern classmates have become a chosen family of ambitious, supportive people who share my values. And sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet and the lake is still, I swear I can feel Grandma Rose and Grandpa Joe's approval surrounding me like a warm embrace. They trusted me with more than money or property. They trusted me with the responsibility of standing up for myself, of refusing to be diminished by people who should have lifted me up. They knew that the greatest inheritance they could leave me wasn't financial, it was the strength to protect what truly matters. As I finish writing this story, I can hear my phone buzzing with a text from Mom asking if I'd like to join them for dinner next weekend. It's an invitation, not an expectation, a request I can accept or decline based on my own schedule and emotional capacity. I smile and text back, I'd love to. Should I bring dessert? It's a small moment, but it represents something profound, a family relationship built on mutual respect rather than obligation, on boundaries rather than guilt, on love that empowers rather than diminishes. My grandparents gave me more than a house by the lake and $1 million trust fund. They gave me the foundation to build a life where I never again have to choose between family harmony and my own dignity. And that, I've learned, is the most valuable inheritance of all.